Percolating.
Nice try.
Hi, it's Lucia. I'm over here. Howard. For your practitioners who are working with the animal kingdom, and when they step into that heart field of the animal and the resonance affects the human, do your practitioners notice a different level of shift if you can get that human person to also consciously shift into this heart-brain breathing or heart-brain state?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a two-way communication that takes place. Animals are sensitive to that. Very quick story. I went to Miraval. This is this resort spa thing in Arizona. It was a client of mine. They have this real famous guy that does the horse deal, you know. And you go out and then he tells you to go up and pick the hoof up on the horse and all that. And so I tried it and the horse didn't pick his foot up. And the guy like took me off to the side and blew me out. He told me, first of all, you need to get out of your own ego. You need to like just, you know, drop all that for right now and forget who you are on your speaker and all that stuff. I don't care about that. And the horse doesn't either. And you go over there and let all that go, and then you lean down there and pick that horse's foot up and see what happens. And I did, and the horse picked his foot up. So what he was showing me was the sensitivity that they have to energetics. And I'm looking, even though I'm not realizing it, looking at a performance thing. I'm looking to make sure that I impress this guy by picking this horse's foot up. And he said, drop all that stuff, and the horse will know. And he did. So the person does influence the animals in a big time way. And they are sensitive to energetics, really, not to... He said things to me like, too, which, you know, don't even talk. Don't try to talk. The horse doesn't understand a word you say. So where I live, there's a lot of deer, and I see them all the time. And I've learned that, you know, when I run up on a deer, don't say anything. Just look at them and hang out, and they'll stay right close to you. If I say, oh, we're a cute little deer, the deer's going to move away. They don't like the human voice, so it's an energetic thing that they relate to.
So I want to refine it one more time. When the human steps into that field of the animal, whether it's a horse or an elephant or a cat or whatever, and then the resonance factor happens, so the human goes through a profound shift in that field of the animal because of their natural heart-based state, or whatever you want to call it, then there's a shift in the human. Have you noticed that if we have a practitioner consciously getting the human to consciously also engage, does that take the human to another level of shift?
I'm trying to understand the question. You're saying if the person shifts because the animal has an influence, can the person then shift even more through their own self-initiated effort?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we are self-empowered beings. We control a lot of that stuff ourselves. There's all kind of energetic influence, whether it's an animal or a sunset. It's what we do with that determines the outcome, and that's where our own heart empowerment comes into that process for sure. So take all those gifts that we get from time to time, like the animal or the sunset or whatever, take it and use it to create that upward momentum, that spiral up. That's the best way to do it.
So then when that human has that experience with the resonant field of the animal, they can also use that experience as a resource when they're away from the animal?
Yeah, the associative memory, if nothing else. You know, remembering what that felt like that day. Just like me remembering that experience I had with that horse with that guy at Mirabal. Same thing.
Awesome.
Can I just ask further to that? My interest here is, have you done any experiments, you know, as far as coherence goes, and connected up humans that have gone in next to animals? In particular, you'll get a person who goes with a horse, and one would think that they'd be going into coherence, but you get a person who's very scared of horses. Can they still go into coherence with that horse? Have you done any projects, you know, wiring people up to that?
No, nothing that specifically. Most of the animal-human research that's been done is actually more like experiments done by others who report back results to us. You know, their own experimentation, but we haven't dedicated research, the time and protocols, etc., to doing a lot of animal research. It's mostly the things we've gotten back from the field of other people using our methods, techniques, and technology in consort with their work with animals.
So in our experience so far, that fearful person can be brought into the field by the animal. Very profound.
Can be, yeah.
I have a question for Tracey. You had mentioned the intake form that you use, and it has all the positively framed questions. I was wondering if you would be willing to share that intake form with people somewhere, somehow.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm currently working on both curriculum and also some tools in that regard, in terms of the art of practice, and working in that in a body talk application. So hopefully not only will I have some specific body talk related webinars about that shortly, but also some tools on my own website. I think it's something as well that you can really be creative with in your own practice. Obviously in a medical practice it is important to identify what has brought them into the office, and that might be physical, so we don't want to ignore and not honor the symptoms. But at the same time, you could take a look at your form and for every symptom-based question, come up with a goal-oriented question. And that is a creative process. I think that any interview should really start off with a goal-oriented question, and perhaps the end of each session and the beginning of the next session can focus in that way as well. So it's something you can be creative with your own intake, but I'd absolutely be thrilled to share what I'm working on with you as well. So if you keep in touch with my website, I should have some tools posted on there very soon.
Okay. Paola? Yes. Just a quick one. Something my concern about crystals over the years has always been the people who go crystal mad and just keep buying crystals and putting them all around their house. And I remember talking to you about that, and you expressed that that can be detrimental. Yes. You know, if they just keep buying crystals and shoving them under their bed and under their bed and all that type of thing. And I think you mentioned there's a sort of a geometric formula for the number of crystals you can have per square footage of room or whatever. Is that?
Yeah, so thank you for asking that. It was someone else had asked me that question before. So I don't know, if a lot of people have felt that if you go into crystal shops and it's crowded with crystals, some people feel dizzy, they have to get out, because this has not been measured, it's just intuitive in crystal literature, but each centimeter of crystal has a 1 meter ratio of energy, just in all directions, in all 360 degrees direction. So we should be careful about that. And in the cardinal method, as I said, it's all about proportion. So you don't want to be overcrowded with crystals or go fanatical about it. Just be proportional. And the best way to do that is to understand that crystals are powerful tools. They have a purpose in your life and they like to flow. So I always say, don't be attached to them, let them flow. Give them away, give them as gifts, but do not crowd yourself or hoard them, because it will, that's my intuition, it will probably just throw the nervous system out of whack. And the reason why some people buy a lot of crystals all the time, maybe to try to heal something with it and think that the crystal's healing them. And that is just not true. What they do is align your consciousness. And really, it's your own mind and how that works that will do the whole job. So they are powerful tools. We should work with them in a proportional way. Do not overcrowd yourself or your body or your home with too many crystals. And as I said, if you think in terms of square feet and square meters in your home, do not have those huge geodes unless you have at least 600 feet, 600 square feet for one geode. That's my experience. I've never measured it. It's just intuitive, but it should be proportional. I still need more research, maybe quantify this, but yes, for the past 25 years, I've noticed that you should not overload yourself or your home with too many stones.
Thank you, Krista Grader. Thank you, Tracey, for offering to give us your draft of what you're doing, because that's come up in conversation with multiple, and it builds on something that has also come up in the exercise you gave us, Howard. And like I know there's other in this room that I came into Body Talk in trauma recovery, and what I had not learned how to do was to recognize the embodied experiences. I was a master of numbing, as many traditionally trained healthcare practitioners are. So as I'm trying to integrate this, I'm looking for discernment on that balance, that some of us has talked about maybe using the standardized body talk intake form to still get to those distressing challenges, but start with that hopeful, optimistic, goal-oriented kind of questions to set the scene, but still create the safe space and the tools that help with compartmentalization and, you know, getting grounded again, as, like the one you offered, Howard, and that I use many, many other tools that people walk into the distress and then they re-ground themselves. It's a pendulating kind of experience, particularly with people that have significant layers to work through, that you're working with them for years. So if you have any feedback on that, I'm trying to integrate it with the continuum of the full spectrum.
Well, I think you're kind of answering your own question in a certain way, which is good. You're thinking about this and having your own insights about how to integrate it in. I can't answer specifically because I'm not a practitioner like all of you. You know, you have your own expertise, the areas in which you are exceptional. And I do what I do, but I'm not a practitioner. But I guess the simplest way of saying it is, to me, love is the greatest healer of all, you know, with whatever people are going through. And that adding a little heart to anything that you do never takes anything away. There's an addition to it just by putting your heart into it. As far as how you integrate heart math techniques in with a particular client who's dealing with trauma, etc., or how do you integrate it in with other modalities that you know are effective. I think if you proceed that with the care and really care about what's going to be highest best for that person, the real genuineness of your care, it's going to provide you with the intuitive information you need to figure those things out step by step, because every situation is going to be a little bit different. But put a little heart into what you do. I don't think you lose anything at all with that by adding a bit more of that to the great practices that you already have and the expertise that you possess already.
Paola.
I think that, you know, I was just thinking as you were asking that question and just in relating to what I was talking about creating an environment that is conducive for healing. And that's right from the get-go. And one thing I've told students in the past who are setting up a practice, and I think that would be very valuable for you as well, having coming from that background yourself, is to, you know, walk into your own space as though you are a client. And right from the very beginning, whether you're walking into the door, who do you greet? What's the environment? Does the environment invite you to heal? Right from beginning to end. Because when we can create an environment that is from the very beginning, from the opening of the door or from the first conversation on the phone, that is centered toward an environment that's promoting health, then I think you're bringing the caring in. You're creating a caring environment. And regardless of your treatment, you're setting the stage for that and following up with that. And so I think walking through your own space and walking through your own experience is a wonderful perspective to have. And, you know, we use the tools of Mindscape, for example. Step in, embody the experience of somebody who's come from trauma. Are you creating an environment that is safe and promoting health right from the beginning? So, I mean, I use those tools myself from a practical standpoint, but I think when we're talking from a position as you are in relation to trauma and healing trauma and supporting trauma, we need to think about the whole environment of the session.
Paola, I'm back here, John, in the back. So there was the presentation this morning and the exercise and the process was amazing. And I'm wondering, for us at this point in terms of using crystals in our practice and incorporating it into our body talk procedure, are you looking at or thinking about creating a protocol or something where we could integrate some use of that for us that we could learn? Because obviously if we use priorities and use other modalities, we come up with our own methodology, but I'm wondering if you have thought about creating something that we could learn to use as tools.
Thank you, John. Yes, well, I'm almost finished with the manual to certify people as carnal method practitioners. So that is one thing that can be combined with the body talk protocol. It works beautifully. But if you want to start right now after the conference, as John was saying, the proportion of crystals is important for the environment, and the time you spend with a stone in your body in a session is also very important. So you have to ask priority for how many minutes, always, and where the crystals should be placed. It could be around the body, in the energy body. It could be on the hands, maybe on the organs, the joints, but always ask priority, and you can start using them now. The geometry will start working, but in the future, yes, I would love to create maybe a protocol. I have some insights about specific body talk crystals, not kernel method crystals for specific things. I still have to research, talk to experts, and create this with consistency, but it is in my plans, yes.
Thank you.
Can I ask you? Paola, I have learned a method where I use 5 elements with stones for hand acupuncture. I learned that from my Chico master. So do you have anything to say about that in terms of which stones to choose and work with 5 elements and link that to the protocol?
Well, that's a great question. My connection with Chinese medicine and the 5 elements came with my body talk connection, so it's recent. And I need time to digest the knowledge before I start saying things. So I'm more familiar with chakras, and I do have stones specifically for chakras. And I have not yet had any insights about the 5 elements, just because I think it's too recent for me to start saying. I mean, I'm not saying that you can't have insights and pop-ups and it just is, but I have not yet developed any connection, but it could happen in the future. I do with the chakras, but not yet with the 5 elements. Maybe you will get the insights. And it's a flexible system as body talk, so maybe for yourself you will feel it, and when you go research the stone, research the color, the crystal system it belongs to, and see if it resonates with the element, and it could be wonderful. So since I love research, I would definitely encourage you to document your insights, and maybe we can create something together with the stones.
Could I just make a comment on that, Paola? With the crystals, you've got a much more localized effect that you can work with in the colors. But remember, the 5 elements is basically, it makes up every single atom of the body. And it's totally integrated throughout, so it's not something you can easily isolate. It's always a mix, you know. And I would think that it would be very hard to really do work with crystals. Over the years, I haven't found anyone who does it as such, other than when you're doing the elements as far as initiations, and you have earth and fire and plants, etc., which, you know, we used to do in Reiki initiations and have all the elements. But within the body, the mix is so integrated that I don't think it lends itself to that as much.
So that's probably why I never really got any clarity with it. But if you want to go with crystals, and there's like the most powerful one for the Cardinal method, and I think everywhere, is clear quartz. It's the 0-point field crystal for the Cardinal method. So for general balance and the God connection and connection with source, always go for clear quartz. I would suggest that.
Hi, Alexi Druin. I kind of have a question for the whole panel. What do you guys think about the future of medicine and healing from your own perspective? What cool thing do you see in the future that maybe we don't know about?
Be careful what you say.
Howard, do you want to start?
Ladies first.
Thanks, Alexi. Goodness, I think, you know, we live in an information age. We are in a wonderful time in learning and education where we have access to so much more information and so much more education. And so I can see in the time that I've been in this field how rapid the acceptance of alternative, I hate that word, but alternative or complementary concepts in medicine have been emerging. So I continue to see even more of that. I see a lot of personal empowerment in medicine. I see a lot of my own clients really looking for the tools in which they can take back their own health, and they can understand at a greater level what their health and their wellness represents for them in the bigger scheme of things. I see people moving away from a fixation on the physical and understanding a more holistic approach to health, and definitely an integration to concepts like nutrition and exercise and meditation, and bringing us back to these core concepts that we see in the Neijing, for example. So I've seen that very much so in my own practice. and in my own education. And I see that hopefully with the availability of education, the availability of information, that it will expand not only our understanding as practitioners, but as consumers in a healthcare industry where people are looking to become more empowered in the attainment of their own health.
Well, I think it's an excellent question, and as a Brazilian person, I'm so proud of Brazil in that sense, because the doctors there, Western doctors, are much more receptive to that integration that you were talking about. So even Reiki practitioners are being legally recognized. John can tell you about the experience with the hospitals there, and I feel that it depends on the culture. So some cultures are more open, and some cultures are less open to this kind of integration. But I feel, as Tracey says, people who are more empowered about their health are seeking different modalities for self-healing. It may not be completely satisfied with one or the other, maybe integrating them. So I don't see an exclusion, but I do see maybe a synthesis of the modalities. And I do see an interest in, that's probably my perspective, but in traditional knowledge. So again, speaking of Brazil, they just founded the newest indigenous medicine center in the Amazonian, with Amazonian knowledge with herbs, so that with your own elements in your culture, you can heal yourself, and you have practitioners with that kind of knowledge. So I do see an expansion. I do think, again, culture has a lot to do with it. Different countries have different approaches and different mentality. Somebody talked about Sweden today. So I think culture has to do with it, and also how the consumer or the patient or the client sees himself or herself and what they seek.
First of all, thank you guys for your answers, for going first. I think your question was really about where do you see, also was about where you see medicine and health going in the future, right? And let me offer an answer that may evoke more questions. At least questions you can think about for yourself. But we are going through, as I talked about yesterday, the transitional time that we're in is extraordinary, unlike anything in the history of humankind. And I made a comment yesterday, didn't log it in because it was a casual comment, that we are in the midst of a dimensional shift in consciousness itself. The very fabric of the consciousness that we draw from that creates reality is morphing and changing. The changes that we're experiencing in our lives and on Earth are actually big changes that are going out through systems far beyond our Earth. So we're in the middle of this dimensional shift. So we're seeing things right now through this one-dimensional lens. We're looking at, like, where would healthcare go? We try to sort of predict that. So what we end up doing a lot of times is we put new clothes on old paradigms. And we can't really see around that corner yet. It's like we're having to do some real good work on ourselves as a global society to get the advantages of that next level of insight to see right around the corner. We sense it, we feel it, but we can't quite see it yet. So we're moving around that corner some. And when we do, then medicine's going to be completely different. My belief is that it is all about the energetics. It is, energy medicine as we know it today is seeing that and hitting the edges of where things are going to go. But it's in its early stages. And as we hit that next level of dimensional shift in consciousness, which is already in town, by the way, it's just growing and coming, but the new intelligence, the new consciousness is already here. And we're learning how to access it and flow with it. And as we do, then we'll start to see more into things like the true understanding of the energetics of medicine. And I believe we'll get to a point where we truly understand, acknowledge, and utilize this, that we will be able to use what created us to heal us. And within the context of that, there'll be a whole new medicine.
The other thing I think is, Rupa Chodre has these morphogenic fields. And what you have is a time where they're developing. But once an idea is known, then it can be known by others more easily. At first it's very hard because only a few people know it. The field is not very strongly formed yet. But as more and more people access the field grows in strength, making it easier and easier for other people to encounter the same change they could never have made before. And it's been shown again and again and again, throughout history. So I think that the historical precedent is there that it's now rolling, it's moving, and will only gather speed. Right now it's a little hard to tell how fast that will be, because big factors pushing against it. There's vested interest in having things the way it is, but I think that they will still be passed by the morphogenic fields, which then directly go to people, and their mass then takes over the revolution that's happening.
Just for everyone's benefit, that was Charles Krebs, who's going to be speaking tomorrow.
Do you want to announce me? I'm going to,
No.
I want to throw my 2 bits in here. I'm nowhere near as optimistic as everyone else. I think things are going to get much worse before they get better. In so much as what I have seen is a massive increase in the utilization of better eating herbs and things like that, and we've now got the doctors here locally giving people cannabis for their pain relief and all that type of stuff. So, but what's happening is medicine is winning here. It's taking over all those things, and the drug companies are taking over, and they're jumping on the bandwagon. So yes, we are getting more opportunities to have less dangerous drugs, etc. And that's good, but it's certainly not coming from the more natural therapies. It's like medicine and the pharmaceutical industry is saying, well, that's going to sell well, let's sell that and let's get that out there. And that interest. Now, what concerns me is that we're having all these remedies coming out, but under the Cartesian model. Try this, if it works, if it doesn't work, let's try this. And you'll follow the ads and decide, yes, I'll do this and do that. And of course, to me, for medicine to become, for healthcare to become a proper paradigm shift, we have to follow a completely different paradigm, and not a Cartesian paradigm, but a worldview of the dynamic systems theory type worldview, which goes into a much more philosophical background and scientific background. And, it's based on science. And even today, what you're learning in the Chinese medicine, as in Indian medicine, is very much dynamic systems theory, because it ties everything in together. But of course it's in a strange language, and same as Indian things, and people are fairly scared of it. So to me, what I'm seeing is a takeover of, basically all your health foods are going to go into Walgreens and all that type of thing, and all these medications. Just notice every doctor you go to now is actually selling medications over the counter, non-prescription ones, but they're selling all their new stuff, and new formulas and new herbal things. But it's Cartesian. It's like, try this, if it doesn't work, well, try this. If it doesn't work, try this. Because it's not really looking at what's appropriate for each person. And to me, that's actually engulfing. I'm seeing that when I travel around. That's really becoming big. And it'll be like health foods are almost going to be weaned out, or they're breaking into whole new areas. Whole Foods start selling cars and a few other things, and probably motorbikes or whatever. But they'll be natural, made of natural steel or something. So I personally think we've got a fight, and I think the fight is we still have this fight between the Cartesian model and dynamic systems theory model, which is the quantum model as well. But for some reason or other, even quantum medicine, we can go to all these seminars and we have all these quantum people around, but really, mainstream science is still frowning on that a great deal. Where, these brilliant scientists I meet, but they're still considered on the fringe. And that's a reality. Just because we mix with them and we can call them in here and they make sense to us, they make sense to us because that's where our mentality is, but we're a minority. Because the average mentality is Cartesian. Try this, get fixed, etc. So it's going to take quite a shift. But at the same time, I do believe that if we stick to our guns and we remember not to fall into the trap of doing the same thing, let's do this, let's try that, but stick to our underlying philosophies of quantum theory and dynamic systems theory, we will eventually see a stronger tide. What is nice, of course, is that when you work, what you see are the people who believe in what you do and they come to you. And that's one of the problems, the worldview problem, is that if you're treating all these people coming in and that really love dynamic systems theory, you think everybody loves it. No, in your neighborhood, those 50 people are probably the only 50 people in that neighbourhood of 5,000 that actually go along with that. And we have to be realistic about that. And so there's still a lot of work to be done in education, but we're going to stick to our guns and stick to our basic principles. And I personally think we've got a long way to go, because I think we're going to be engulfed by the drug companies and everything, who are now very much into the health food market and all that new stuff. Okay? So sorry, I'm not quite as optimistic, but I do believe in the long term, probably long after I'm dead, we'll see the big turnaround.
So just one last question.
This is a comment more than a question. I'm Janet, and I support John in what he says, as in the importance of sticking to our guns. And I just want to remind everybody in this room that we're here because we believe in priority-based healthcare. And I think it was Hippocrates who said that they would rather know something about the person who had the disease rather than what disease the person had. So if we're looking at an integrated medicine approach, we're looking at a patient-centered approach where we're going to look at each individual and figure out what that individual needs. And that's very much what Body Talk is about.
And one quick one there. Sorry, one more follow-up there. And part of that whole process is to really start looking at the dynamics of what Tracey was talking about the other day, because to me that is a very important dynamic that we have to embrace for the future.
Great. Thank you to our presenters. Thank you all. Thank you, last thing, people.